Everybody. Welcome. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. Blair, Lance, great to be with you as always. This is usually our kind of quick 30-minute lunchtime snapshot. Today is the 2023 outlook, semi-passive franchise ownership. We're going to go through kind of the dilemma that perhaps you can relate to. Talk a little bit about franchising generally, and then we've got a treat to have Lance Freeman from Exponential Fitness with us to talk about Stretch Lab, one of the most exciting concepts in boutique fitness and in wellness, and then some next steps. So very quickly, I'm Charlie McGee. I'm in Washington, 10-year franchise consultant. If you have your phone, take a picture of the QR code. That's going to come up later in the presentation for next steps, so we can help you take a look at your entrepreneur profile. One bullet I've added to my list there is backyard golf course architect. And if you want to hear more about that, then you have to connect with me offline. Blair, great to be with you. Blair was my mentor in this business. We were partners for a long time. He's 25, maybe close to 30 years now in franchising. He's the vice chairman of FranNet, franchise consultant, spending most of his time working with clients, and a diversified entrepreneur. I'm not going to steal his thunder, but he's got his new venture to tell you a little bit about later. Blair supports prospective franchisees in Oregon, Idaho, Alaska. If you're calling from one of those locations, take a picture of his QR code, and that way we'll sort you guys out to work with the right people. But the dilemma, thinking about 2023, and I think in a lot of ways, it's not much different than where our headspace has been over recent years, and I dare say over the last decade. And the dilemma is this: how am I going to get to where I want to go the best way? Is it the traditional paradigm of a job is the secure, predictable, safe play, managing risk? And I dare say that's an outdated paradigm, because how much predictability is there really in corporate America these days? Or maybe it's a lifelong dream to achieve the American dream, which is owning a successful business of your own, where you have autonomy, you have unlimited opportunity, and you have a sense of freedom that you just can't get in any other way. So if your dilemma is, God, I'd really like to do something a little different, I'd like to seize a little more independence, we've got a recession coming maybe, what's the best way for me to safely make this change? And the answer may be semi-absentee ownership. It's a hack. It's having it both ways. It's keeping your job and at least the perceived income security and predictability that offers, while getting a business going that doesn't require you operationally on a daily basis. Maybe it's building an off-ramp from your corporate career path to something different entirely. So, when you say, okay, semi-absentee, keep your job. I mean, come on, how does that really work? Well, you're not managing the business, you're managing the manager in the business. You're monitoring KPIs. Technology has done amazing things for virtual leadership. Sure, you're involved in hiring. The degree to which you establish trust and development of your manager may give them more opportunity to make those decisions. But you're partnering with them certainly initially, and you're involved in marketing. It doesn't mean you're creating the marketing. You're implementing and executing a proven system of opening a location successfully and continuing it successfully. You keep your job. You're working on the business, not in the business. It might take anywhere from 5 to 15 hours a week. When you're talking with franchisees that have achieved this terrific balance of having a job and a business, it's one of the important questions that you'll find out under our coaching. How much time each week does it take? You're leveraging your leadership. It's sort of like, I remember being in college at the University of Texas, and the last semester, it was the capstone class, where you kind of pull everything that you've learned over your 4 years together and put it into play in a project. And to me, a business is very much that same way. If your corporate career, you've been learning all these different things along the way, and this is a chance to really put those things in place. You don't have to have industry experience in the particular vertical. Often, usually, a semi-absentee opportunity is based out of a retail storefront. And the play initially is to grab the best real estate possible for that brand and scale the business by opening multiple locations. That is the path that successful semi-absentee franchisees take. So maybe you're trying to build your net worth. Maybe you're at the tail end of your perceived career in corporate and retirement, and I need something. Maybe it's a further diversification of your portfolio. The economy right now, we're not going to take any time to try to speculate on what's going to happen, but everybody knows diversification is the name of the game. And then, as I mentioned before, a corporate exit strategy. How can I get off that wheel and start doing something more of my own? So Lance, I'm going to introduce Lance, and then I know Blair has a few things to say. So Lance, you want to share your screen?
Yes, thank you, Charlie.
I'm going to stop sharing.
There you go. I think now I can share for you.
Perfect.
Perfect. Thank you for the introduction. I appreciate that, Charlie.
Of course.
My name is Lance Freeman. I'm president of franchise development for Exponential Fitness. I'm one of the partners in this company, and delighted to be here today. Before I kind of jump in and kind of tie off a lot of the things that Charlie mentioned about semi-absentee ownership relative to our business model, I wanted to introduce Blair here briefly, as I'm sure he has a few things to talk about on this as well.
Yeah, thanks, Lance, and I'll be fairly brief. So as Charlie introduced me, obviously I'm with FranNet in multiple roles, but mainly help people in Oregon, Idaho, and Alaska find the franchise that's right for them, but also on the franchisor side, and have owned multiple franchises over the years. My wife and I wanted to start yet another business here in Oregon about 2 years ago. And along came Exponential Fitness, specifically the company that you see on the screen right now, Stretch Lab. And our research team sent it to a few of us to sign off on. And to be honest with you, I laughed. I'm like, what? Really? Stretch Lab? Like, is that really what I think it is? Or, are people paying to be stretched these days? And but here's kind of the bottom line. As my wife and I were looking to start a business here in Oregon, we had a few rules or criteria that we wanted to find in a business. Look, I know a lot about a lot of different franchises, everything from how much money they make, how supportive is the franchisor, the systems, the procedures, how successful the franchisees are. And for what my wife and I were looking for, and all the knowledge that I have about all kinds of different franchises, my wife and I purchased this particular franchise here in Oregon, Stretch Lab. And again, it was a company that I originally laughed at. But what we were looking for is it had to be semi-absentee because I own other businesses. So I wanted a manage the manager type of scenario. I wanted a franchisor with excellent support. Stretch Lab is again, Lance will go through this. As you see that big X behind them is part of a company called Exponential Fitness, which is a publicly traded company. It is a very large, excellent support company who owns multiple brands. So their support has been second to none. It's been wonderful. We also wanted a brand that was different. We wanted something that really had no competition. And there's a little bit of competition with StretchLab, but StretchLab is clearly the leader within this industry by a long shot. But we also wanted to diversify. So the reason why we did this a couple of years ago is we wanted to take some money out of real estate and invest it in other businesses that we thought had a good play in the market and could do very, very well within our local market as well. So we also wanted a feel-good opportunity. In other words, I wanted to go into my semi-absentee business. As I checked on it throughout the week, I probably spend around 5 hours a week, maybe 10 max on StretchLab. But every time I go in there, I wanted to feel good. I wanted to see smiles on our members' faces. And we do it. The members that pull me aside and say, Blair, thank you so much for opening up this business in the area. It's made a major difference in my life. That kind of, makes me smile and sometimes brings a tear to my eye just to see the difference in the lives of people here within Oregon, or specifically Bend, Oregon. So we wanted a good community connection, and we've never looked back. So if you have questions specifically about StretchLab, obviously happy to answer them. And obviously Charlie and I can help in regards to franchising in general. So with that being said, Lance, talk about Expo and StretchLab.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. I want to just briefly touch on the parent company, because I think that the power of the parent really adds a lot of value in considering a franchise opportunity, because it just gives you as a partner so many more resources in this thing. And so briefly want to touch on that. And then, as you mentioned, I want to highlight StretchLab a little bit as one of our 10 brands here at Exponential, because it is such a great example of a semi-absentee opportunity that's a really simple, straightforward business to run. And we literally have hundreds and hundreds of executives that are currently working in C-level executive positions in corporate America today that are doing this in parallel and really building not only income but equity in this business that's really going to be worth something in the end if they decide to exit later down the road. But if you haven't heard of Exponential Fitness, as Blair mentioned, it's really the parent company that owns these 10 brands that you're seeing across the top of the screen here. Our philosophy is really to make boutique fitness accessible really to everyone. And so we started with this little no-name brand called Club Pilates about in 2015. In fact, a brand that was born out of 2008 in terms of the Great Recession, I like to say. And today we sit at again over 10 brands. We have over 5,000 licenses awarded globally. We're in 15 countries today. We have 2,500 studios operating in the U.S. domestically today, and we have never had a permanent closure with an Exponential studio. We're really proud of that track record. Last year in July, as Blair mentioned, we went public, and I'm not telling you to buy our stock as a substantial shareholder. I'm not supposed to do that. But our stock is up 60% since our IPO, and it is the third most successful IPO of 2021. So why is that? It's really due to the performance of our system. And so again, back to the kind of that power of the parent, we'll open 500 locations this year alone across the 10 brands, which is a pretty mammoth feat for any franchisor. We did report, so this is public knowledge, that our average Exponential business, this is our C student, if you will, puts up about $500,000 in unit volume, or that's a fancy way of saying top line gross revenue, with average margins of about 25 to 30% in our business model. So that's public information. That's our C students. So we certainly have performers that do well beyond that. I love what Charlie alluded to, and Blair, when you're looking at franchise models, one of the neat things, when I hear this a lot from candidates that will say, oh, it's very crowded in boutique fitness, and my response is always, I couldn't disagree more. When you really look at nationally franchised brands, that have over a few hundred licenses awarded and studios operating, there's really only 3 outside of brands that are within Exponential. And if you look at even our brands and who our largest competitors are, we really dwarf them. Not to sound arrogant with that, but again, I always say if you're looking to buy a mom and pop coffee shop, maybe not so exciting because there's a lot of coffee shops out there. But if you had the opportunity to buy a Starbucks, would you do it? yeah, you'd probably give it some good consideration because they are the juggernaut, obviously, in the coffee space. And so that's really where we sit in boutique fitness, is really the largest platform by a substantial gap of anything in the marketplace. And so we're really the curator of these brands. You know, we bought Stretch Lab as an example, as Blair mentioned, with literally 3 studios in Southern California. Today, we sit at over 800 licenses awarded nationally, over 200 stores operating in the brand. And so, you know, we like to say, don't join a category, as Blair mentioned. You know, you want to really find an opportunity where you can be the first mover, where you can really dominate in a segment, you can control the market and the market share. And so that is really what we look for in brands that we develop, so that there really aren't, you know, large major competitors that you're going up against. You don't have 10 competitors in, you know, example, in this dedicated stretch space. And so it's a really neat opportunity from that standpoint. One of the things that we kind of love about our business models are that they are semi-absentee, as you know, Charlie was mentioning. And I love how he laid out, you know, on the slide, really what your, you know, responsibilities are as an owner in a business model like this, which I'll touch on briefly today. But I think one of the, you know, furthermore, one of the beautiful things about our business model specifically is it really is a simple business model from the standpoint of, we do not have, there's no cash in our business. There's no collections in our business. There's no food. There's no spoilage. There's no shrinkage. There's no inventory. It is a simple, straightforward business model for a franchise partner to operate. And it really is truly manage the manager and manage your business by the KPIs, or your key performance indicators. That's really your responsibility in the business. And it should be, you know, as the gentlemen have alluded to here, 5 to 10 hours a week at most. In fact, our average franchisee in Exponential owns 3 units, so they are scaling this business over time. And it, as counterintuitive as it sounds, the ones that own more units actually spend even less time at the business because they have more infrastructure. And it really is a great opportunity for you to be able to create a lifestyle for yourself, where you're not buying yourself a second job, or if you have, you know, gone through a reorg, or again, as Charlie alluded to, maybe at a point in your career where you're not wanting to work the 80-hour work weeks anymore, and want to stay active in something to where you're making a positive impact on people's lives and still bringing in a substantial income and building equity in something, then this is a really great vehicle to consider. One of the things I would just mention briefly on relative to Stretch Lab, all of our business models, again, we go into a certain size box. So you are typically looking at retail if you're looking into a semi-absentee based business. So our footprints are pretty relatively small relative to, I'd say, retail. So you'll see in the Stretch Lab here, our average model will be anywhere from 1,200 to 1,500 square feet. The largest size model we have in Exponential is about 2,000 square feet. So pretty small footprint, which keeps that large fixed expense really in a manageable place. The other expense that we have, and the 2 biggest expenses you have in our business model, are rent and payroll. When you look at our payroll, a lot of our models really have a one instructor that might be teaching a class of up to 50 members in a class. Those types of ratios really can yield some great margins. I love that my slide, we didn't collaborate on this, Charlie, but almost mirrors yours to the T. You know, our franchise partner, what we're really looking for is someone that's going to really manage that manager, manage the business by the numbers, if you will, in a semi-absentee opportunity. Our business model is, as I mentioned earlier, very simple and straightforward, and it is membership based. And I have always said I won't do anything in franchising that isn't membership based personally, just because I feel it's just gold. It creates predictable month over month reoccurring revenue that you can count on every month. And in our business models, we see anywhere from 6 to 7% attrition monthly, which is incredibly low. So our brands are very sticky. We have very high retention with our members. So we have a very fast ramp path because our pre-sale marketing starts at our LOI, our letter of intent signing. And most of our business models actually literally open at grand opening with enough members to cover their entire operating overhead and be positive cash flow, which I can bounce off these gentlemen here, which have almost 40 years of franchising experience. That's almost unheard of, to be able to have that kind of ramp to profitability. Most retail businesses are 6 to 12 months, maybe even longer, which is not a bad thing. But when you can ramp to positive cash flow literally at your grand opening as an average, That's special. It's unique. And so we do that because of our pre-sale opportunity. We get into sustained operations and what we call a mature business within 6 to 12 months of operation in this business model. And again, we see that mature AUV that I mentioned earlier that we've reported as about $500,000, in maturity after about 12 months. Our average business model, we've reported this as well, actually gets 100% ROI in about 2.5 years and drives about a 40% cash on cash return, which again, I don't think you'll find that in the marketplace. And so it's a really neat opportunity from that standpoint. I don't have a lot of time today to actually go through these financials, but I can tell you that the Stretch Lab system itself averages about 700,000 in unit volume. Again, on that 20 to 25% EBIT as an average system. Most of our models, in fact, our average model in Exponential is about 350,000 to get into, and that includes some of our larger footprints. Stretch Lab is actually one of our least expensive models because there's not a lot that goes into the build out. So our average build out here is shown as 160 to 299. It's kind of the high end of that budget. We are on the SBA registry, and it's very easy to obtain financing. So our typical franchisee will come to the table with about 50 or about 100,000 in liquidity, and then use bank financing to fund the rest of the business. A few things I just wanted to mention, Charlie, before we consider some Q&A here, is one of the biggest misconceptions, especially what's in the news today, is that fitness is it recession resistant. So I just wanted to share briefly, say fitness and health and wellness, which we consider Stretch Lab to be in that mix. I will make a bold statement and say one of the most recession resilient spaces in franchising. And that's really backed up by the data. If you look at 08 and after 08, fitness was one of only 4 segments that continued positive growth through the Great Recession. In fact, it grew from an $18 billion industry to a $21 billion industry from 08 to 2011, and then continued to grow for literally 21 straight years and has continued on that path. This year, the projected growth of the space is 33%. So I always say you always want to look at spaces that have shown they can really stand the test of time, that show continued growth year over year, and are not going to trend out. So we are really pride ourselves in going into segments that we know will be legacy businesses. So these are businesses that are 20+ year business models that we know will continue to be here. And great example, we own Pure Barre, which is a 21-year-old brand. Club Life was born out of 08, and I can go on. So, and then we have some younger, mature brand, more emerging, like Stretch Lab, that are growing very quickly. But we were also very COVID resilient, because our the parent company strength, again, we were able to support our franchisees and stand up for them to make sure that we got through that challenging period without any permanent closures in our business model today, which we're really proud of that, being able to say that as well. So as we look today, we can all debate whether or not we're in a recession or whether we have one looming. I would tell you today, every KPI that we track in our business model is at the highest point it's ever been in the history of the company. And that's, our reported data. So we are not seeing any negative impacts of the recession. In fact, we're seeing almost the opposite in terms of a perfect storm after COVID, people wanting to get healthy and really a very high demand for our services. So again, if you have interest in an Exponential brand or Stretch Lab, please reach out to Charlie and Blair for more information, and I'll look forward to working with you in the process.
Thank you, Lance. And I'll concur with that. Just from a Stretch Lab owner perspective, our membership has been climbing every single month. Yeah. So we're not seeing any slowdown.
Fantastic. We are coming up on our time, but we do have a couple of minutes. Blair, do you see anything in the chat that you want to address?
No, we should probably bring that up. Actually, here we go. Yes, if you do have questions, bring them up in the chat or Q&A, and 3 of us will get them answered. Here's a question. Are most of the employees W-2 or 1099? What are qualifications or background you look for? Certified personal trainer when getting up. Okay, close and personal clients. What kind of COVID?
I got that one, Blair. Yeah, great question. Our employees are W-2. When you're running a franchised business, you're putting uniforms on your team. You're asking them to follow processes, so they need to be 1099. I feel even more importantly, when you're really building a winning team culture with your staff, they need to be W-2 independent. Just the word independent, means they're not going to follow your processes, and they're kind of do their own thing. So they are W-2, but it does allow us to really attract some of the best talent in the marketplace to come and work for us. What that talent looks like, depending on our brand, will be folks that either have in the example in Stretch Lab, they'll have a body work background, meaning they might have a kinesiology or exercise science background. They could be a personal trainer, as you mentioned. They could be a massage therapist or a PT. Those are all great candidates for us to come and work on our model. And one of the nice things about our model, again, is our labor are really passionate employees. They are not folks that are minimum wage earners that are sitting back and collecting an unemployment check. This is their career path. So it's a great employee to have in your business.
As far as the COVID side of it, what we do in our studio is, look, we do have masks. We do work with some of our clientele is elderly and they ask for it. So our flexologists is what they're called. Will put on a mask if they are asked to. So the other nice thing is, if COVID ever returned, I hope it doesn't, that we were deemed an essential service. So we were allowed to stay open during COVID.
Yeah. Yeah, and then to the second question there regarding the labor pool, again, to come back to this, our labor pool, again, is a labor pool that really spends their time and money getting certified to do what they do. So we have not seen any negative impacts of labor pool shortages in our business model. However, in saying that, and Blair will validate this, the two biggest challenges in retail are always going to be real estate and employees. I do feel that those are kind of some of our special sauces here at Exponential, in terms of we've got a great labor pool that we are recruiting, and we were able to recruit some of the best talent because our business models are really strong, and they want to be, they want to work for us. They want to have a true career opportunity. So we're able to really recruit those types of folks. So we have not seen those types of issues that maybe you might see more in food, where you're hiring a minimum wage earner that didn't set out in their life to flip burgers and that sort of thing. So you'll definitely have a lot more turnover with that type of employee.
I concur.
I like the disruptiveness and the innovation too, Lance, that Stretch Lab has shown with the flexologist position. Because as you said, it's attractive to such a diverse group of people that have a variety of backgrounds, but really have fun, sometimes full-time, sometimes part-time in these roles. Is that fair to say? Blair, do you have a mix of full-time and part-time employees?
Our general manager is full-time. Everybody else is part-time. They usually generally work about 15 to, I would say, 20 some odd hours per week. The general manager is full-time.
Gotcha.
So, great. You want to wrap this up?
Is that typical, Lance?
Yes, it is. It's typical of all of our brands. That's right.
Gotcha. Thanks, Azim. Good question.
It takes certified. To certify flexologist, it usually takes about a month. Yes, there's various costs that don't have time to get into, but you can contact me directly if you want to go over that in detail. Happy to do it. So you'll get our contact information here in a second from Charlie.
Right. Got time for one more? I don't know. I'm feeling a little kinked up in this office today. I wish there was a Stretch Lab nearby. I could go over for a stretch. It feels so good. That was my experience personally, just as a customer. When I went in there, when you get a massage, you're kind of like, you want to go to sleep. But when you go have a stretch, you're like, get me on the golf course, get me, whatever it is that I'm doing, because I feel like I'm at the height of my powers.
Yep.
It's cool.
You want to wrap this up, Charlie?
So, yeah. So Lance, let me get my screen back.
I'm sorry. Yes. Apologize. Yes.
And let's see, where was I? So next steps. Perhaps during this short time, and maybe before and maybe a few days later, you're going to give some time, some reflection to your goals over, in the road ahead. And you're going to, inevitably think, okay, so here's what I want to accomplish. How am I going to get there? What's going to be the sort of tactical plan and strategy for doing that? Part of that process is determining a funding strategy. And it's good to do this even if you're unsure whether you're going to take a step toward business ownership or not. It's like when you're buying a house, the first thing you do is you get pre-qualified. You figure out, what kind, based on our financial readiness, what's the right fit? What's our budget? And there's lots of different ways to funding strategies for a business. Lots of talk these days about rising interest rates, but that's not necessarily a reason to be scared off by it. So Blair and I can also, we have resources that we can share with you, which will answer some of those questions. And my all-time favorite quote is, "The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step." And maybe your step was attending today's program, or watching a recording of it that we shared with you. If you haven't done it before, I strongly encourage you to take the next step, which would be to your entrepreneur profile. It's a reflection of your entrepreneurial DNA. It will be a wonderful context for Blair and I to have a chat with you about your goals, your entrepreneurial dreams, and if it makes sense for us to work together. Don't forget, it doesn't cost you anything to work with Blair and I. Our services are no charge to you. We are compensated by the franchisors like Exponential, and the other 250 franchisors that we work with. So if you have your camera, take a picture of, if you're in Washington, of my QR code. If you're in Oregon, Idaho, Alaska, take it to Blair. Don't worry, we'll sort it out if there's a mistake. We're so glad you could join us. 2023 is going to be a great year. I can't wait to get into it. Sure, there's going to be challenges. There always are. And that's what makes this adventure so worthwhile. Lance, thanks so much for joining us. It's always great to be with you. Blair, as always, a pleasure. Everybody have a great one.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
Thank you.
Lance.
You bet.